All right, welcome everybody. May 1st, beautiful day in May here in Colorado. Hope it's nice where you are. Hope spring is showing up because it certainly is here. May 1st. Welcome to Selling Free from Fear. A little masterclass put together for you. Pretty excited. A little nervous if I'm being honest. Fear is not something that discriminates for who gets it, who doesn't. But thanks for joining. Got some disclaimers to lay out for you here a little bit. This may go a little long. A couple things I'm share with you. First of all, when talking about fear, when talking about a lot of things, but firstly, when talking about fear, words actually matter. So there are some things you'll hear me say. Probably a lot of things you'll hear me say that certain some of you, Noah Goldman might agree, but semantics matter. So I'll be using words in certain ways. I'll be maybe using words in different ways than you've heard and saying that other words don't mean certain things. Trust me, semantics are important in this journey. And feel free in the chat. I'll have it up. I'll do my best to answer stuff as it comes through there. If you have a question about a word or how I'm using it, please don't hesitate to shout that out. Definitely don't have enough time. I know I said this was an hour including Q&A. There's no way, not even close. I actually have blocked 3 hours for this. I hope to God I don't need it. It will be recorded. I'm hoping to get the main conversation done in about an hour and then have questions. But as I really worked into this thing, it was hard to cut some things out. It was hard to make it small because fear is not a small topic. And I really mean two things. We don't have enough time in terms of hours, but also there's a lot to cover. There's a lot to cover when it comes to fear. And as I'll talk about in a minute, this is really the beginning of a journey. You know, if this is the first real conversation you find yourself having about fear, you're not going to walk away, after an hour or so with all the answers and sitting there on the top of a mountain in a white flowy robe or something like that. I said a minute ago that I've got some anxiety today, right? Well, actually I don't anymore. I had it till a couple minutes ago. But as I'll talk through in this presentation, fear is a pretty insidious, pervasive, persistence little character. And, I set this thing in motion 6 weeks ago, something like that. I set the intention earlier in the year, but really didn't have the gumption to actually come out and declare that this was going to be the conversation, because this is very different. A lot of people know me as sales guy, process, cold calling, that kind of stuff, and this is going to get this will be a lot different than that. So as you can imagine, leading up to today, there were all sorts of challenges, all sorts of things that got in my way, or ways I should say that fear tried to get in my way. Again, that'll make more sense in a little bit. You might see my LinkedIn post a week ago. Literally took my entire presentation that I'd written and threw it out. It was not going to cut it. And I saw where fear was holding me back, hiding things or keeping things obscured that I wanted to share, all in the name of, pretty obvious things, not wanting to sound strange, weird, have people who otherwise follow me and compliment my work go, what the hell are you talking about? And I promise there'll be things today that may not sit well with you. This is not a selling webinar, and by that I mean there's nothing to sell at the end. As you guys know, I don't do webinars to pitch a program, or if you buy now, you can also get with this special offer. So that's not the intention, but I am going to talk about at the end of this how we are going to run another program, probably not paid either, but really that takes this to a different level, because for me this is such an important topic. It's a topic that affects every single person in the world. I guess the one thing I would leave you with before I kind of really launch into this thing is that one of the beautiful, magical, really powerful things that this whole journey of building this presentation has reminded me is how much we are all the same, how much everybody is exactly the same, right? You guys sent me questions with fears. You gave me scenarios with your fears. It's a gross overstatement and a generalization, but essentially we were all saying the same thing, right? Your fears are my fears. Josh's fears are Madeline's fears or Noah's fears. We're all the same. We all wake up on Monday morning or just before we're about to wake up with that thought in our head saying, this is the week, it's all going to come crashing down. They're all going to figure out, I'm a fraud. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, that I'm making this up, that I'm not worthy, on and on and on. It just, we are all the same. So when you go out in the world, and maybe that might even be the most important nugget of this entire conversation, is every single interaction you have with every single human being on the planet, they feel the same things. They have the same concerns, reactions, challenges. They're no different, right? That's sort of the irony of this whole thing. That being said, and I said, we don't have all the time in the world today, so I'll try to move quickly, but my only intention is to show you something that maybe you haven't seen before. And we call that a yellow Volkswagen Beetle, right? These are actual photos, as you can tell, of a Volkswagen Beetle, but what I mean is they're photos of Volkswagen Beetles, yellow Volkswagen Beetles, that are taken by me. Everywhere I go, everywhere I am, I see these things. They exist everywhere in the world. For me, the yellow Volkswagen bug is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for the concept that once seen, things can't be unseen. I'm getting a weird sort of rendering thing. I'm gonna move that. I see what happens there. Once you see something, you can't unsee it, right? Everybody on this call, most people in the world, know what a Volkswagen bug beetle looks like. And you know what a yellow one looks like, right? You cannot unsee that image. You can't make it get out of your mind. And that's really what today is about. You're not going to get to this presentation and go, oh, aha, I get it, right? But you will, I promise, have caught a glimpse of a yellow Volkswagen Beetle called fear, and what fear really is and how fear really works. And then the magic really starts to happen when this presentation ends. And the magic is you see it everywhere. You see more of it. I see a dozen of these freaking things every day. There's people on this call going, oh, there's no yellow Volkswagen Beetles in my area. I never see those. You're going to see them, right? If you don't see a yellow one, you'll see a bright green one, but you'll see yellow ones. Take a picture of them, send it to me, right? This is the metaphor for once you have seen something, once you know it exists, you cannot unsee it. Once you see the true nature of fear, once you see how fear works, you're not instantly transformed into this, mystical, at peace, person chanting Om, as I said, on the top of a mountain, but you have begun your journey, your inevitable journey to full realization of what that is, and ultimately to peace, right? So that's really all today is about, is to show you some things, and you're going to disagree with them. You're going to say, that's stupid, that's not right, that goes against my worldview. Maybe it goes against your religion. This is not a religious conversation. This is a conversation about how fear works to take away from our lives, to take away our power, to take away our joy or happiness. And my hope is today you walk away with at least one real good visual that you see and go, oh, there it is. And you're going to see it everywhere in your life. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you see it, it starts to lose its power over you. And that's really what this is about. Come on, kids. There we go. All right, here we go. I'm going to close I can't really do it. I don't know how I do this thing with the chat. I'm going to close chat for some reason. Hopefully it'll pop up if there is something. We're going to start with something kind of big here. We're going to dig right into the crazy talk. I'm going to share some uncommon knowledge with you, right? Remember I said Volkswagen Beetle. Everything you feel, right? Emotions and sensations, everything you feel is created in your mind, right? They don't exist out in the world. Your pain doesn't exist where I can touch it. Your sadness, your sorrow doesn't exist where I can feel it. Your joy, your happiness doesn't exist outside of me. Yours is not mine. Mine is mine, and it's created in my head. It exists only in my head. Every feeling, every sensation. Well, people say, Townsend, what about, somebody cuts off a finger? Well, that hurts, doesn't it? Well, the answer is sure, but it hurts in your mind. Your finger doesn't hurt. Pain is created in your mind. Pain only exists in your mind. Well, it's caused by your finger. Well, let's think about that. There are amputees who still feel the sensation of an appendage. There are people that feel pain that's not there. So what really causes that? But rest assured, any feeling, emotion, or sensation is created only in your mind. As such, emotions are hallucinations. They don't exist. They're not real, right? I mean, that's that's kind of shocking. That's kind of a frustrating thing for somebody to say on a Tuesday morning. What do you mean it's not real? I feel it. I sweat. I have physical, repercussions of these emotions. That may be so, but at the end of the day, I want you to just understand we have this little computer box up here that's filled with stuff, gray matter, chemicals that creates these things called emotions. They actually don't exist in the real world. I don't see any, no emotions or sensations are attending this masterclass here today, right? Just people. What you are feeling right now, I have no access to, right? Perhaps your face is screwed up in a certain way, tense, what have you, that I might infer, but even that is not the manifestation of an emotion. That is a physical thing that's going on. Now, I get it. They feel that way, right? The terror that you or I or anybody feels when they're about to pick up the phone, or God forbid, when they realize the prospect is answering, the adrenaline that surges, the cortisol that pops out, the tension in the neck, that sure feels like it's real, but the emotion doesn't actually exist except in your brain. If it's only in your brain, it's a hallucination. But we make them real. We try to make them real with this thing in our mouth, with this thing called our mouth, right? We have an emotion in our brain. If you were completely placid, made no outward gesture, and kept your mouth closed, nobody would know what's going on. And in fact, there's a whole body of practice, if you will, that is intended to both manufacture fake emotions. We all have seen movies, as well as hide emotions, right? We all know people who have concealed their emotions, what's really going on from us, right? So I want you to really understand that emotions, feelings, sensations, while they feel really real up here, they aren't actually real. They don't exist in the physical world until we talk about them or do something physical, right? Consider the statement, I am sad versus I feel sad, right? Most of the time we say things like, I'm sad, I'm happy. Actually, no, you're a Homo sapiens, human being, male, X years old, X height, right? You are not how you feel. You may feel a certain way, but when we use language, I'm sad, I'm nervous, I'm scared, I'm terrified, I'm happy, right? We are taking a false, right? I know you don't like when I say that, but a false hallucination and trying to make it exist in the real world as something that has substance. Townsend is sad. Well, no, Townsend's Townsend. There may be a momentary emotion of sadness, there may be a sensation of tenseness, a sensation of relaxedness or whatever. But I am not my emotions. I am not my sensations. I want you to ponder this a little bit, and I'll give you an example, right? Emotions occur while we're awake. Driver cut me off. I'm pissed. I'll be using that example a lot, so I want you to pay attention. The driver cut me off, so I'm pissed. I am scared of making cold calls, right? I am intimidated by the prospect during negotiations, right? Those are awake emotions. We're all familiar with those. But we also have emotions when we're asleep, don't we, right? When we're asleep, we feel things. Sometimes we even wake up from a dream with that residual emotion. I'm pissed. I'm happy. I'm laughing. I've been, next to my wife in bed, and she wakes up crying. She's also woken up laughing. When she's crying, I hold her and I gently, hopefully, wake her up. When she's laughing, I leave her alone because she's having a fun dream. Who's going to mess with that? Which gets me to the question, what's the difference, right? What's the difference? We wake up from a dream, pissed off because something happened, happy, joyful, excited, sad, whatever, versus an emotion in the waking hours. What is the difference, right? If you think about it, the difference is the degree to which that emotion persists, right? When the driver cuts me off and I get angry, when somebody does something to me and I'm offended, well, I have to get over it. I have to process it. I have to go see a therapist. I have to go, have a drink, right? There's time that is required to move through that emotion. Why does that not happen in the dream, right? You don't have a bad dream in the morning, wake up angry because your spouse cheated on you or you just lost a deal in your dream and are pissed for 2 weeks, right? Think about that. Emotions, sensations, feelings. Sensations, I've woken up from a deep sleep, dreaming. I was walking on the beach and stepped on a piece of glass. Woke up with a searing pain in my foot. Woke me up. It was so painful, it woke me up. Well, realized pretty quickly, wasn't on a beach, I was in my bed. Couple options. Made it up in my head, or maybe I poked, I don't know, I have a down comforter, poked a little feather or something. Couldn't find a feather. Was made up in my head. But there's a problem either way, right? Because if a feather poked me, how did the dream get in front of the feeling, right? These little sensations called nerve endings travel to our brain in tens of thousands of a second, maybe hundreds of thousands. But somehow I had a whole prolonged dream about walking on the beach and the pain of stepping on glass that cut in front of the actual physical sensation, right? Well, that's kind of weird. Or I just made the whole thing up. In my brain, I made up searing pain. Wonder what the implications are. So let's dig into that. I'm going to explain why I say that emotions are made up. They don't exist. And I'm going to show you why emotions that exist in the real world, or at least the waking world, as I'll call it, stick around, right? Why they linger, why when somebody cuts you off in the morning, you can be pissed till lunch. When you and your spouse have a fight, 3 days later, you're still, swirling in it, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Somebody 10 years ago cheated you out of money, and whenever you think about it, you get enraged, right? Why is that? Well, in any moment, in any instance, there are three things in play. Two of them are here. There is what is, and by that I mean what is occurring in the physical world. I am sitting in a chair. I'm talking to my computer. Honestly, I can't even validate or verify that anybody's listening. I got some green lights on and it says there's a bunch of participants, but I'm going to take that on faith. So what is I am sitting in my apartment, looking at the beautiful mountains, staring at my computer, talking, and then there is emotion happening in my brain. What's going on in my brain right now? Well, pretty relaxed, peaceful, excited, right? Kind of happy. Joyful, no nerves, what have you. So what is an emotion? The two things. Now, the third element here is where it gets interesting. There's the story that connects the two, right? We are raised, trained, a less polite term, to associate what is with emotion, right? We are taught that our emotions occur because of what is happening. Right? I feel X because of Y. I feel happy because the webinar's here and I get to share some cool stuff with people. I feel at peace because I'm looking out, over a beautiful set of scenery and doing something I love. I feel X because of Y. That is the story, right? The story connects what is in the emotion, right? Going back to my example, in the dream, I am unhappy. I am mad because somebody cut me off or cheated me out of money. As soon as I wake up, I realize, I was dreaming. That didn't happen, right? For real. And what begins to happen to the emotion, right? It dissolves. 10 minutes, 15, an hour, maybe a couple hours later, that emotion is faded. The emotion is gone. It doesn't exist. Contrast that with the real world. Well, the story is real. The driver did cut me off, right? So I am angry because they cut me off. What if that wasn't the case, though? What if you were angry, and what if they cut you off and they actually had nothing to do with each other? Well, that gets a little weird, and that's probably a topic for another masterclass. What I can tell you, though, is what if you could disconnect the story? When we wake up from the dream, it's easy to disconnect the story of what is an emotion, right? Because it was a dream. What if we could do that in real life? What if all those emotions, the negative emotions, would go away, right? What if they could go away just like you're in a dream? Not that they wouldn't happen, right? I'm not saying you're not going to feel anything. That would be silly. What I'm saying is, what if when an emotion came to be, an emotion showed up, a hallucination of your brain, you were able to disconnect the story, overwrite the story, for lack of a better term, and in doing so, take away the power of that emotion and make it dissolve back into the nothingness from whence it came. Here we go. First lie of fear is your emotions are caused by what happens in the real world. That's a lie. That's the first lie that fear tells you. When you know the lie, and I'm going to show you in the next hour or so how to spot the lie and how to dissolve the lie, you get power over them. Now, there's a second lie of fear, because fear is not stupid. Fear is a tricky bastard. Because as soon as something happens and we correlate it, the very next thing we start to think about is, what's the real reason? Well, why do I get upset when this happens? We're not going to talk about this today. And there's actually two more. There's a third and the fourth lie of fear, which we'll probably do in other sessions. But we're going to talk today about the first lie of fear, which is my emotions are caused by that which happens in the real world, right? The truth is the opposite. I'm going to tell you something about truth. Truth and lies are not opposites. Right? People perceive them as opposites, but truth is what is. Lies, right, is what obscures the truth. Think of it this way. Clouds are not the opposite of sun. Darkness is not the opposite of sun. It's the absence of sun because it's not visible. When the sun is obscured by the cloud, the sun is still there, right? So we're going to share the truth today and expose the lie, and the truth is always the truth. And fundamentally, this is your yellow Volkswagen Beetle, right? This is the thing that is. We can talk about it, discuss it, debate it, but it's not going away. You'll see it more and more once you know it's there. Nothing created in your mind, not a single emotion, not a single sensation. I'm talking even pain. I'm not going to get into that today, but I'm talking even physical pain. Nothing created in your mind is caused by or in any way associated with anything outside of you. I get that's radical. Sit with it, take what you can, leave the rest. Don't get hung up on it. But what I want to do today is really help you guys see that lie of fear, right? Because fear doesn't want you to believe that. Somebody put a comment and said, emotions are suggestions, but not you. I'm going to take that further. Emotions are hallucinations, Steve. Emotions actually don't even exist, right? They only exist in your mind. They're not suggestions for anybody, right? They're actually a lie, a thing that doesn't even happen. Oh, that's weird. Let's keep going. All right. You may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? How did Townsend get here? Well, that's a damn good question. Well, where is here? Here is a place where I wake up every day and seek to be in peace, right? To seek to give my gifts, live my purpose, further my vision for the world, but essentially to spend as much of my time in peace doing whatever it is I'm supposed to do. But it wasn't always that way, and I would say there were a lot of painful situations in my life, a lot of challenging situations in my life, which I identified as my life. But they were just things that occurred that started to crack things open. And that's really how it goes. But I wanted to share one in particular. And I got a couple stories as we go through this little journey today. Somewhere around, gosh, I want to say 2007, 8, 9, I can't remember. I was on stage in Las Vegas, in front of 1,000 or so people. Used to do a lot of public speaking. Loved being on stage, loved public speaking, loved sharing knowledge with the world. And I was paid to be there. And I walked up on stage, standing in front of the lectern. The presentation began. Started going through my slides, and some weird shit started happening. I lost the ability to breathe, to speak. My vision went like this. My whole physical world just started to crumble. I was having a panic attack. Townsend Wardlaw, who had been in front of, thousands and thousands of people, was having a panic attack on stage in front of an audience who was paying me to be there. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I can't even describe to you. I mean, I thought I was dying. I thought I was having a heart attack. Maybe I wished I was having a heart attack. And I ran out of the room. I would say walked briskly probably, but I went out of the room. And from that moment forward, I stopped speaking in public until about 2 years ago, and I'll tell you that in a second. But this experience was so overwhelming, so powerful, so devastating. Not only did I turn down every speaking engagement that came after that and turned down a lot of money, I convinced myself that public speaking was something I didn't actually want to do, didn't care to do. and was somehow beneath me, right? Public speaking is too, doesn't really accomplish anything. You spend an hour with folks, they don't learn anything. It's stupid. The only people that do it are charlatans, right? This is how powerful fear is, right? Fear will take that which you love and twist it and turn it into something that you've got a very convincing story. Not only you don't believe is even worth doing. That's powerful, right? 2 years ago, I want to say, through a lot of steps in the journey, I made the decision on January 1st that I would speak that year. And I was going to get in front of an audience if it killed me. And I was kind enough, the folks at whatever it is, the Society for Inside Sales Professionals had me come to one of their conferences. And I got up and the first thing I said was, this may be interesting. The last time I was on stage in front of 1,000 people, I had a panic attack and ran out of the room. Well, not going to run out of the room today. So either you're going to get a great session that I've prepared for you, or you're going to get to watch me have a full-fledged panic attack in front of you. So one way or the other, it'll be fun. Anyway, that's part of this journey, part of how I got to where I am. And there's more to that story. But, one of the lessons there is that the way you confront fear is to bring it out into the open, right? Like I said at the beginning, everybody feels exactly the same way you do. Whatever you're feeling, people feel it. If not in that moment, then 10 minutes before, 20 minutes after. But we all hide it, right? Fear lives in the dark. Fear cannot live in the light. And fear lives because we're afraid to say what we feel, right? We're afraid to share the hallucinations in our head. And in doing so, we give them power and make them real. You want to get rid of them, you share them, they lose all the power. More on that. So what does it have to do with sales? Well, none of this hokey-mokey crap. When are we going to talk about selling free from fear? Well, first I want to give a quick clarification. When I talk about fear, I am not speaking of emotion, right? When I talk about emotions being created in your head, there's an emotion called fear. I don't use that. I say anxiety or fright, or I use fear with a small f. When I talk about fear, I refer to the force of fear, right, that produces all of these negative effects for us, right? I'm thinking about fear as opposed to love, right? If you like other words, you can talk about right and wrong, good and evil, God and the devil, right? I mean, whatever your bent is, think of it as the force that lives in opposition to peace, joy, love, like I said, good and evil, God and the devil. So we're talking today about the force of fear that creates these phenomenon called negative emotions in action, which I'll talk about. And in light of that, sales is simply a canvas for fear. I talk about fear having canvas to paint on, right? Fear being a force wants to cause a ruckus, wants to have an impact. It wants me to run off stage. It wants me to never speak to an audience again, right? That's what fear desires, because fear only cares about two things, right? Well, not fear cares about two things. Two things are in play in any instance. Our emotions, these hallucinations, ultimately create our experience of, right? What is your experience of having dinner with someone you love? What is your experience of making a cold call, right? That's where emotions and sensations live. Fear creates the negative, right? Emotions create our experience of. Fear lives in negative emotions. Love lives in positive emotions. You can take any of those words above, God, devil, right, wrong, and make the same implication. One side creates negative emotion, and one side creates positive emotion, right? So sales is simply a canvas for fear. What's another one? Public speaking, right? Public speaking is a beautiful canvas, right? A context for fear to work its mischief, right? Relationships are a canvas for fear. Work is a canvas for fear. Raising kids is a canvas for fear. So when I talk about a canvas, I simply mean a context for fear to operate and take what is, create a negative emotion in our brain, and try to weave a story between the two. We're going to unpack that in more detail, but hopefully you get it. So the other component phenomenon that is in play is, in any moment in time, we can choose action or inaction. So if you really net out the human experience to its most basic components, any single moment in time, now, now, the emotion in our brain creates our experience of. I am talking to you on this masterclass. If I have anxiety in my head, if I have doubt in my head, if I have, I don't know, guilt in my head, that is my experience of this regardless of what it is, right? If I have peace, if I have joy, right, that is my experience of this interaction. So emotion creates our experience of, and then in any moment, we either act or don't act, right? In this moment, I am taking action. I'm speaking. I can stop speaking. That's not action, right? Action versus inaction is the essence of what we have a choice for in any moment. And the emotion going on in our head creates the experience of. There is what is, action, no action. And there is emotions and sensations, our hallucination, which at least for most of us creates the experience of. If you have questions, hit me in the chat stuff because it's pretty big, but we'll keep going. So the sales canvas, right, really is comprised of the functions of selling. This is not a presentation about a sales model or sales stages. I'm just using an arbitrary, very simplistic view of the different things that happen in selling, right? In selling, we do prospecting. We cold call people and such. We do qualification. We try to determine if they're fit. We do discovery. We try to understand their pain, and we, something related to closing, negotiation. Don't get hung up on the function. We could have a list of 100 things, but I'm using this as an example to show you how at each stage of the sales process, or any stage, there is an experience that fear can affect, and there is inaction that fear can incent, right? Fear only wants us to not take action, right? Because then we're not moving, not doing, and fear wants to have a negative experience. Let's unpack that. What are the experiences associated with prospecting, right? Most of you here would agree that nervousness, anxiousness are pretty commonly occurring negative experiences associated with prospecting. In terms of qualification, might be flustered, right? Not know the right words, the right questions asked. We might be feeling inferior when we're talking to an executive, right? These are negative emotions that create an experience of. Qualification is just a part of the sales process where we ask some questions. Yet our brain is churning up these emotions called negative emotions. Oh, I don't know what to say. I feel like, I don't have the right to be asked these questions, right? That's a negative experience. Discovery is the part of the sales process where we're supposed to understand what the prospect cares about, right? Think about it. We're reaching out to another human being for the sole and express purpose of understanding their pain, their need, what they're looking to accomplish so we can help them. Yet, 99 times out of 100 when I'm coaching a team, when I say, what's showing up for you? Well, I feel like I'm being pushy, asking these questions. I'm not really comfortable with this. And in terms of closing, they bought, they didn't buy. Well, when we don't close a deal, we feel embarrassed, right? We have a negative experience associated with closing, right? But closing is just somebody didn't buy. So it's not actually the closing, is it? It can't be. We feel shame, we feel guilt. Now let's talk about inaction, right? Prospecting, you pick up the phone, you dial. Not complicated. Yet what happens in reality? We decide it's the time to perform extensive research, right? We need to spend all our time on social networks, social selling, right? Because, we've decided that's more important and that works better. My favorite, of course, is whenever cold calling is on the time block, that absolutely is the most appropriate time for us to go and make sure our sock drawer is at its optimal organization state, right? Obviously, sock drawer being a metaphor. With qualification, what happens? What inaction occurs? Well, we ask about a decision maker when we know that's a ridiculous question. Yes, I'm the decision maker. We don't use a context, which I've shared in other master classes, to really probe for the point of authority, person of authority, right? We ask a question we subconsciously know is going to give us a bullshit answer. In discovery, when somebody says, yeah, we want to do something, what we have isn't working, we want to do better, in an objective scenario, we understand that is not a compelling reason to buy. That won't motivate investment, but we come back and we vehemently represent to our sales manager or to me if I'm coaching you that no, that's all there is. That's not quantifiable, right? In terms of the closing process, we accept, we'll get that done in the next few weeks versus asking for commitment to a decision date. I want to be very clear. These are not judgments. I'm not talking about what you should or shouldn't do in a sales process. What I'm saying is the force of fear in its desire to create a negative experience and hold you in action is using sales as the canvas to accomplish these things. This is what I watch every day. I see it play out, right? This is how we behave. This is how we act, right? We have these negative feelings and we fail to take action. We stand in action. Did you make any calls today? No. Did you call the prospect and say, where's the damn contract? No, I'll wait till tomorrow. Those are examples of inaction. Where do you think that's coming from? My friends, that is fear, painting on the canvas of sales. So how do we solve for this, right? What's the fix? Gosh, I hope I know. Current approaches are a little janky, right? This is how we typically handle things, ourselves today, right? When we're faced with inaction, when we feel paralyzed, we, try to resist inertia. We try to push through, right? We try to desensitize ourselves. One of my favorite gimmicky techniques for getting over fear is, oh, we're just gonna do this so much until it doesn't bother us anymore, right? We rationalize. We take a course, right? We're gonna follow a system. We get the 10 habits of highly effective this, right? We train, we practice, we role play, all in an attempt to overcome those very natural inclinations that I just showed up top, all intended to overcome the insurmountable power of fear, right? So a little good news, bad news, right? The reason that you feel the way you do, right? We're all adults on this masterclass, right? We didn't wake up yesterday and decide we're going to give sales a shot. We've been doing this for years. We've tried things. We've been coached. We've read books. You've talked to me, right? But those things on the slide before, they still happen, don't they? They aren't going away. Well, the bad news is they're not going away, right? Fear ain't going away. There is no killing fear. There is no removing those things that happen. Just like you're not going to, remove negative emotions in your head, right? I always joke, how's that working out for you? Well, I created a system, so okay, how's that working out? Well, I'm still not making my cold calls. And if I'm making them, I still feel like shit when I make them, right? Pretty fascinating. I'm going to tell you a little story. There is an individual who I had the privilege of coaching, still do. But at the time, I'd been coaching for about 3 years. Now, this person is, you look up enterprise sales rep in the dictionary, and he's there, right? Handsome, tall, well put together, fit, speaks well. I mean, the guy's like, he's the epitome of successful salesperson. And, to not be overly braggadocious, he'd spent the past 2.5 years coaching with me, right? Training, coaching, all my process, all the components, and intensive. And when I say intensive, I mean intensive preparation and role playing for important meetings, right? This guy's selling very high level deals, interacting with very high level decision makers, CFOs, C-level kind of folks, and consistently coming back from these conversations after more coaching and role playing and training than anybody I've ever spent time with in my life. So he's coming back from these conversations as well equipped as one can be, having prepped and practiced it. And he's coming back not having achieved the objective for the call. Hey, we need to understand this about the budget. Okay. Preparation, role playing, hard targeting, all the techniques. Come back from the conversation. Okay, what's with the budget? Ooh, I didn't get that. All right, I want you to think about this. This is somebody who is set up for success in every possible way, from technique to preparation to live fire role playing kind of stuff, who is subsequently not able to accomplish the goal. This was a couple of years ago, and it was really my wake up call for the fact that technique only works so well. It only takes you to a certain point. And ultimately, there's something up here that's going to determine whether we're successful or not successful, right? And there was a very specific moment a couple years back where we were prepping for a couple of calls. and we're sitting in a conference room. He actually flew into town for this, and showed up early in the day, and that wasn't my plan that day. That wasn't my plan that day. He said, "Okay, I'm ready. Here's my goal." I said, "Nope, we're not going to do that." I said, "I want you to put down your notes." I said, "We're going to sit here for a minute. I want you to check in and tell me what's going on. I want you to check in with your feelings, your emotions, sensation." We'll just sit there. We sat there for 5 or 10 minutes. Anyway, I said, "So where are you at?" And he said, "Well, I feel a little tense. I feel a little nervous." Right? I said, "Okay. Where's that coming from? What's the story there? What's the story that those emotions are attached to?" Because we've done a little bit of this prep work, right? Explaining what I'm going to share with you today. He said, "Well, I got this important call, and I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to screw it up because I screwed up. I screwed up a lot, and I know that if I keep screwing it up, eventually you're going to stop putting up with me after all the support you give me, and you're going to fire me." I was actually his boss at that point. I said, "Yeah, okay, well, certainly a possibility in the story of our mind. What happens then?" He goes, "Well, then I lose this job. I lose this incredible opportunity. I'm out in the street. I'm looking for another job. I'll probably find another sales job, but it won't be as good as this. And, I'll probably screw that up as well. Probably fail at that, because if I can't fail with this support, I get from you, how am I going to be successful there?" I said, "Okay, what then?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, then you failed that job. Well, then I'll probably have a whole succession of jobs where I, kind of go down, go down, go down." Long story short, he took this all the way to, "And then I'll be back selling insurance door to door where I probably belong in the first place." And I said, "And then what? And then when you're knocking on doors back selling insurance where you've belonged all along, what's the real fear story that's sitting behind that?" And he was quiet for a couple of minutes. And he said, "Well, then I got to go tell my dad that I couldn't make it. I got to look my dad in the eye and tell him I failed." So I want you to sit with this, right? We're sitting there prepping for a meeting, and the emotions of that meeting can be traced all the way back to a story that doesn't exist yet, might exist years in the future, where he's got to go back and tell his dad he couldn't make it. Ultimately, the hold that fear had on him was not only all these levels, but the final door, no pun intended, to be open was, "I'm going to disappoint my dad." Right? "I'm nervous in this meeting because I'm going to disappoint my dad." Wrap your head around how intricate that is, right? So sat there for a couple of minutes, and I said, "So how you doing? Where are you at?" He goes, "I'm good." I said, "What do you feel?" I said, I don't feel anything. I feel at peace." I said, "Great, make your fucking calls." And I sat there for the next 2 hours. I wasn't on the calls. I was just listening as he proceeded to make the best, most powerful, incredible sales calls I've ever seen, right? All of his power, all of his facilities, all of his training, was at his fingertips. Whereas behind the story of fear, he was powerless, right? That is where you can get to, right? The fear doesn't go away. The stories are there, but when you out the stories, they lose all of their power. But we're taught we need to change. We're taught we need to fix something. You need to not feel that way. You need to have a different technique. That's called change. And there's a problem with change. The fundamental underlying concept of change is we're not here, right? He was years in the future having a conversation with his dad he didn't want to. He wasn't here in this moment. Change is all based on, I don't want to be here, right? I want to be someplace else. I want this not to be happening. That's a problem, because not here is not a destination. Whatever is happening, saying, I don't want it to be so, doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it references the problem. When we get into the questions later, I'm going to share with you guys somehow even the language you ask the questions in is probably what's holding you in the place that you're at, right? I don't want to be here. Anywhere is better than this. Better is not a destination, right? Denying you are here, not wanting to be here, is actually what keeps you here. I don't want to be afraid. What's the key word in that sentence? It's called afraid. I put this up on LinkedIn a few weeks back. We have this incredibly powerful GPS. navigation device that can take us anywhere from our current situation to our desired future, right? That's how we move through life. And what do we do with it? We deny where we're at. I don't want to be here. This sucks. I shouldn't be here. And we put in a future location, a desired future that's better, that's not this, right? You plug into your, imagine this is your GPS here. Current location. Well, I don't want to be here. So this is no good. Where are you trying to get to? Someplace better, right? The only words, the only code that the GPS can comprehend is what? Here, right? Everything associated with not being here keeps us here because it's the only word that's interpreted by the most powerful navigation device ever built. Think about that. The fundamental problem and the reason we're stuck where we're at is because we don't know how to use the GPS. We're using it wrong. We're using it to deny where we are and try to get away from where we are. And that's the only language and wording that we use. So is there another way? Well, yeah, that's why we're on this thing, aren't we? Okay. Get into some stuff, and then we'll hopefully have some questions here quick. We're actually doing pretty good on time. Not too bad. So the short answer on how we do better is exactly what I shared in my scenario. We must disconnect the story, right? There is what is, there is the emotion that is happening. The only thing, like when we're in a dream, that's holding it together is the story. When I disconnect the story, right, I'm gonna make the story go away. I don't really make the story go away. I out the story, right? I admit to the story. All that is left is what is. I'm standing here talking to you guys. I'm talking to a CFO. I'm making cold calls. And the emotion. The emotion doesn't go away magically instantly when I disconnect the story, but like in the dream, it fades out pretty quickly, right? When you can disconnect the story between what is and the emotion, right? That emotion just dissolves. It's amazing. It's the most powerful thing. All of the gentleman's fear that I was sharing with you dissolved. All his inaction, right? Because it's not just the emotion, the experience of, it's inaction, not asking the right questions, not using the right technique, avoiding what have you, all right? So how do we do that, right? Well, the high-level answer is you first must become aware to what's going on, the emotion. You have to admit it's there. You have to acknowledge its existence. You have to acknowledge that it's having the effect it is. And then ultimately you have to accept its presence and declare it, and it takes away the power. Sounds simple, doesn't it? It actually is, just like I shared with Ryan. But let me give you a little more prescriptive version of that. This is the specific approach that I use to dissolve any emotion or sensation and move me from inaction to action. I call it a fear hunt, right? You got to find it. You got to call it out. And just like waking up from a dream, you can feel the hold of that emotion starting to slip away, right? So this is in quotes because when I say identify and share, I mean it. In this moment, I feel. State the emotion or emotions, right? Find and share the story fear is telling you. Well, fear is telling me I feel X because they're caused by Y. Fear is telling me that they're caused by something, right? It's not true. And then you tell the truth. But I know this is a lie, right? I know the truth is not that my emotions and sensations are being caused by what happened. My feelings are created in my mind are not caused by anything outside of me. Ideally share with somebody else, right? I'll tell them more about that in a second. So let's play with that. Driver cuts me off and I'm pissed. I'm enraged, right? I want to say something about this before I get too much further. This technique works even if you don't believe in it. Right? So what I'm asking you to do, or I'd like to invite you to do, I should say, is to sometime in the next week, day, whatever, find a situation where you're activated, where a negative emotion exists or inaction exists. I can't do this. I feel frozen, etc. And try it, right? Try this exercise. Say it out loud. You don't need to believe that this is real. You can call it kooky talk. You can call it new age bullshit. It doesn't really matter. It will still work. Find the emotion and share it out loud. Use exactly what I'm putting up there. This is literally a tool. In this moment, I feel pissed. Fear is trying to convince me that, my emotions, my anger is actually caused by that guy that just cut me off. You can do it while you're driving. If you live in LA, you'll have a chance, the next 20 minutes. Fear is trying to convince me these emotions are caused by, the fact that this guy cut me off. But I know this is a lie. Even if you think I'm crazy and you don't think it's a lie, try saying it out loud. That's how you come to believe this. But I know this is a lie. My feelings are created in my brain. They're manufactured. That driver didn't piss me off. Emotions showed up in my brain. The driver pissed me off. They're actually not related because stuff in my mind can't actually be caused by anything outside of me. I create that in my own head. Say it out loud in the car. See what happens. If you really got some guts, share it with somebody else. Share it with somebody else in the vehicle, right? The concept of sharing is important. If you try to do this mantra, this little approach in your head, it won't work. Fear owns your brain. It spins up emotions. It spins up inaction. Fear cannot live between the mouth and the ears. When I share out loud and basically reveal the lie of fear, right, the truth stands there. The story is out there. I've shared it. The emotions start to fade. And you're left with all that what is. You're left with all that is. That's a better way of saying it. Fear can't live between the mouth and the ears. Questions on that? This is pretty big stuff. I'd be interested to hear if you guys try it. But it's a fun little game to play, right? Commit to doing it a couple times over the next week. See what the heck happens. Won't kill you, right? All right, let's keep going. Got another quick story for you. Got a call, an email actually, a response to an email. God, it had to be a year ago. In fact, it was a year ago. Gentleman, in response to one of my emails, and I think the email was something like, "What is fear costing you?" He wrote me a letter and he said, "Fear is making me drive 300 or 400 miles out of my way to go visit my son at college. You see, I'm terrified of driving across bridges. Terrified, can't do it. So rather than driving across the Snake River Bridge," this is not the Snake River Bridge, I don't think, but rather than driving across the Snake River Bridge, I've had to create another route that takes me, 300, 400 miles out of the way. I said, "Oh, interesting." Shot him a little email. I said, "You interested in being done with that fear forever?" And he wrote back, he said, "Absolutely." So we got in a call. I said, "All right, here's the deal. When's your trip? When are you going to see your boy?" And he said, it was called 2 months. I don't remember exactly, right? "I'm going to go see my boy in 2 months." I said, "Great. First thing I want you to do is I want you to go to your little map routing software and print out a map of, the new route, because you're going to drive over the bridge in 2 months. So the new route is you're going to drive over the bridge. You're not going to take the long way around. Print it out, put it on your refrigerator." I said, "Next thing I want you to do is between now and the time you leave for your trip, I want you to tell everybody that you meet, right? Strangers, right? Any chance you get that you're going to go visit your son at college. And you're originally going to take a long way route because you're terrified to drive across bridges, but you've decided to drive across the bridge. And you may have a heart attack and die, right? That may happen. You're going to drive across the bridge. You'll see your son. Tell strangers. Tell the waitress at the diner, right? Anybody you meet, tell it to them. No context, no lead in. Don't blame me. Don't say this guy Townsend made me do it. Just tell the story. Then when you get in the car on your trip, I want on the inside of both the back windows, print up a little sign that says, "I'm terrified of driving across bridges." Just put it up there inside. And because you had a couple-day journey, every time you stop someplace for gas, whatever, tell whoever is there, the gas station attendant, buy soda, tell them that you're going to be driving over the bridge and you are, fairly well convinced you're going to drop dead of a heart attack because, you're terrified of driving across bridges. Kind of a bizarre little set of exercises, isn't it? Well, long story short, maybe 2 months later, whatever, I got a little email, or maybe it was a text message, and it was a video of the dude driving across the bridge, laughing his ass off. I tried to find it. I couldn't find it for this, but he's literally, videotaping himself driving over the bridge and just giggling and laughing. Fear had no power, right? He's still scared of driving across bridges. There is a fear in his head. He drove across the bridge. There was no inaction. There was no negative emotion. In fact, there was joy. Fear can't live in the dark. Fear can't do anything. Fear is powerless when you bring it to the light. Crazy, right? All right, time for some questions. I'm going to stand up because I've been sitting for a while here. Hope you guys are hanging with me. Now it might get interesting, right? I got a bunch of these, so I'm going to do my best. I looked at them briefly, but I really tried not to script these too much because I think it's more interesting that way. Wayne shared this, and I'm an introvert. How do you conquer the fear of feeling you're rudely interrupting someone who doesn't know you yet? So I found this really interesting, and I want to show somebody because that's Wayne's question. I am an introvert, and then look what happened. Instantly, he switched from an I to a you, right? Look how sneaky fear is. Fear doesn't want you to admit and own, right? Wayne is afraid. You're going to see this in so many of these. One of the most interesting things is very few of you actually shared a fear that you have. You shared a fear that others have or a fear you know about, which I'm assuming you're talking about yourself, but you didn't state it as such. This is how sneaky fear is, right? Right? What if he had written, I'm an introvert. How do I conquer the fear of feeling I've rudely interrupted someone who doesn't know me, right? You may not find that interesting, but I find that absolutely fascinating, right? Fear doesn't even want you to own the fear and share it, because if you did, it would lose all its power. Well, a couple ways I can handle this. I could have a discussion about, how introversion has nothing to do with fear. Everybody has fears. I could have a discussion, I'm not going to, about how feeling you're rudely interrupting someone you don't know is what's called. I'm not going to do that because each of those responses validate the fear, right? Arguing with fear validates fear. Arguing with fear strengthens fear. When somebody says, you shouldn't be afraid of that, right? What's the central word, right? Fear. You shouldn't be afraid. So what I'm going to say is own it, right? If you're an introvert, cool. If you're talking to somebody who doesn't know you yet, why wouldn't you share this statement? Hello, this is Townsend. Have I caught you at a bad time? Yeah, what's this about? Well, first, Wayne, I want to share with you that I'm pretty much an introvert, and it terrifies the crap out of me to pick up the phone and call people like you and interrupt their day. So I'll be brief, right? What if on every cold call, which I'm guessing you're talking about, Wayne, you just shared the fact that you're terrified, and you're terrified, because fear is telling you a story of, how you're going to bug them, right? How many times do you think you would need to make that statement before you just stopped making it, right? People are like, well, I don't want to have to make that statement every time I call. My question is, do you really think that would be possible, right? If you knew that on every call you were simply going to declare your fear and see what happened, how many calls like this do you think it would take before that fear didn't even show up anymore? Interesting to try. How do I overcome the fear of making cold calls? Ken, great question. Who says you have to, right? As I've been sharing all along, this isn't about overcoming it. It's about owning it, right? I am making cold calls. That's the job I'm doing right now in this moment, if I am. In this moment, I am terrified. I have anxiety. My neck hurts. I'm sweating behind my ears. My eyeballs want to pop out of my head, what have you. And fear is trying to tell me the story that I'm afraid because of this, but I know it's a lie, right? Try it, Ken. Try disassociating the story and make the call anyway. Who says you've got to make a cold call without any fear in your head, right? Try making a cold call being more terrified. Watch what happens. When you bring fear to the light, it goes away. Fear affects every day, right? This is another, similar example, right? I heard this again and again and again, right? Paralyzing fear, inaction, experience of. Next time you knock on a door and somebody answers, well, let me back up. When you're standing in front of the door on the sidewalk, set the intention to go up and knock on the door and share that fear with that person. Share the fact that you are fearful with that person. Share the fact with the person that it was difficult for you to walk up the steps, right? Set that intention. I'm going to go up there, I'm going to knock on the door. When they answer, this is what I'm going to do, right? Say out loud, I'm terrified. Fear's telling me it's because of blah, blah, blah. Walk up to the door. When they answer, say, hi. Before I get going too much, want to let you know that I'm new, and knocking on people's doors and talking to people like you makes me really uncomfortable. My armpits are sweating, and I might poop my pants. Okay, maybe don't say that. But the idea is, how many times do you think you would have to do that before it never happened again, right? The beautiful part is I share this with people, this technique all the time. I say, go tell people you're afraid. Go declare an intention to make cold calls with fear and stutter, right? And they say, well, I don't want that to be my habit, right? Well, who's telling you that? Fear's telling you if you do this thing, you'll never stop doing it. What I'm telling you, if you do it, it'll be gone so fast you won't know what happened. Interesting. What is the main cause of fear? Is there one? Well, I think what I was trying to say through this presentation, Tim, and some of these I used because I wanted to reinforce some points, so I'm not making fun of Tim's question. There is no cause of fear, right? Fear is a force. Fear exists always, everywhere. It's not going away. Emotions are spun up in your head. They're not going away until you disconnect the story, in which case they'll dissolve and another one will pop up. You'll have tension pop up tomorrow. You'll have anxiety pop up tomorrow. There is no permanent, okay, I cut the valve and now fear is done. If bad emotions, negative experiences are done. This is a practice. This is a way of dissolving fear in real time that you can get faster and faster at. I have fear show up in my life dozens, if not hundreds of times a day, right? The only difference is I know the secret. I know the lie of fear. And I use that to very quickly see that it's happening. Oh, there's a negative emotion. Fear is causing that. Right? Tell the truth, they're not connected, and watch the emotion dissolve. It's a pretty fun little process. How to overcome the doubt that fear creates in your mind. Again, who are we talking about, Laura? Right? Okay, that's good. A fear about my abilities in life, what I'm capable of. That's good. But notice how fear always sneaks in. I'm talking about somebody else, right? This is great. What am I capable of? Even when I achieve something, I feel as if it's not the full truth, right? What does fear do? Fear wants to make it fuzzy. There must be more. This isn't the real reason. Lies, lies, lies. All there is what is in this moment, right? When you achieve something, fear is already telling you you could have done better. How bananas is that? No more bananas than telling you that if you blow this cold call, you're going to have to go talk to your father, a few years from now and tell him you failed, right? That's fear's racket. That's fear's game. It's all it tries to do. It's never going to stop. You don't need confidence, Laura. You need to know the trick that fear is playing on you. You need to know that when you achieve something and the little voice in your head says, you could have done better, you could have done more, that's fear. Call it out. Call it by its name. Make fun of it. This was a really good one, I thought, right? In our trade, there's nothing that differentiates my company's offering. How do I move through the feelings of defeat, right? One of the things I see most often in on a lot of aspects of selling is the reality that we want some messaging, some feature, some benefit, some differentiator, some reference to be the thing that we're bringing to the customers, the reason why they should talk to us. Well, you should talk to us because we were featured in this magazine. You talk to us because this company got value. Talk to us because we have this nobody else does. At the end of the day, they're talking to you, right? And fear says you're not good enough to go have that conversation. There is nothing that differentiates any company's offering, right? If you were at your best competitor who had the fanciest, features, the better price, fear would still be playing this game with you, David. So the path through is not to figure out how to get rid of the feelings of defeat, not to figure out how to have a better value proposition. It's to come clean. Simply share that in this moment, you feel X, right? You're out there selling. You feel X or Y, defeated, worthless, not good enough, inferior. And fear is telling you it's because you don't have the right product or the right set of features, right? At the end of the day, the only truth is fear is playing on you, that you're not good enough for somebody to talk to. But if you had the right product, then they would, right? Because if they reject the product, well, then they're not rejecting you, right? At the end of the day, I am afraid, I have fear that they're going to reject me. And the story is it's because I suck. That's the truth. This is a really good one. when you avoid procrastinate doing something you think you should do, how do you tell the difference between fear and objective concerns regarding that something? I wish I could interact with Alex and say, do you still want to ask this question, right? Because the question itself is silly, right? It's a good question. I'm glad you asked it. That's why I put it here, Alex. But what is the difference between non-action and justified non-action? Well, if non-action means I'm not going to jump off a bridge and kill myself, that might be a good thing. But generally speaking, right, the actions we seek to take when we aren't doing them are not things we shouldn't be doing. They're things we should be doing that fear is trying to keep us from doing, right? Hey, thanks, Ken. Thanks for joining, man. Can fear be a positive influence? Great question, Courtney. I thought about this a lot because I wanted to say no, never. And then I changed my answer to fear is not an influence, right? Fear doesn't have an opinion. Fear is simply a force that exists to create negative experience and inaction. It's not doing it because it's bad. It's not doing it because it doesn't like you. Fear is impersonal. The question that others asked, I might have another one of these, which I think you're also inferring is, can fear have positive effects, right? Can fear do good? Great question, right? I have lived with fear all my life. I have, for most of my life, been, subject to the whims of fear versus understanding how fear works and having, the power to dissolve fear. Notice I don't say I don't have power over fear. Fear is powerful. Fear is not going away. I do have the power to dissolve fear in my life. But I don't look back in my history and say, well, I got here because of fear and this was good. I also don't go back and say, man, my life sucks because of what fear did to me. I hold to the belief that everything occurs exactly the way it is supposed to occur. Notice I didn't say for a reason. Everything happens the way it's supposed to occur. Back in 2005 or whatever I told you earlier, I was supposed to run off that stage having a panic attack. I don't resent that experience. I don't look at that experience as positive or like it got me someplace. I simply look at it as one of the steps on the journey of my life that happened and happened exactly the way it's supposed to. In the moment, there were negative experiences. In the moment, there was lots of crap. But, I think there's a tendency to believe that things like stress and fear are important, right? I'm coming at it from another side, which says you can actually live pretty damn free from the effects of fear, right? So in a way, I kind of lied to you with this presentation. You never sell free from fear as in fear is gone, but you can sell free with fear, free with the reality that fear always exists and doesn't have any power to make my life or your life have a negative experience or cause an action. Why do we fear both success and failure, right? So the truth is, good question, Marcus, we don't really fear success. We don't fear failure, right? We have an emotion. That emotion is tied to a story called What If, right? The gentleman I referenced in the story had a bunch of emotions. They were tied to the story of, right? This is what's going to happen. Well, that same thing happens with success, right? Fear will use the potential for success to cause inaction, to cause negative experiences by telling the story of what happens when you're successful. So you don't really fear those things. You fear, or I should say fear is created by the story of. Hopefully that makes sense. Question from somebody, is fear a biological reaction to keeping us safe? No, absolutely not. That is not the case, but we're not going to be able to handle that on this thing. To be a little less cheeky, when people think of biological fear of a lion gonna consume us or not, the reality is that, well, the reason I say these are very different. In the animal kingdom, in the non-human world, an animal, a gazelle, is sitting there eating. All of a sudden, the gazelle pricks up its head, thinks there's a lion there, gets the hell out of there, right? The gazelle then goes, right? Well, so ostensibly the gazelle is elevated, right? Adrenaline, what have you. The gazelle, when they get out of danger, that's the word I'm thinking of, instantly returns to a calm state, an active state, eating, and goes back to what they're doing. So if you want to think about biological fear is not the fear that is sensed in the form of emotions. It's the sense of the fight or flight mechanisms, reactions of the body. So it's really not the same kind of fear, right? If you are afraid, feeling anxiety, etc., that's not fear, that's emotion, right? If I came up to you and startled you, or you saw an attacker coming and your body took a largely autonomous or autonomic reaction, right? You don't consciously raise your heart rate under stress. It just happens. That's not really fear. But good question. How do I overcome the fear of stepping on toes, getting to a higher level contact? I'll use what I did with other folks, Madeline. I would say the reality is, if you're in a sales situation and you're going, I need to be at a higher level because logically that's where the decision made, and I don't perceive that I'll be able to get to there. That's a very logical flow. What happens then? Well, I have anxiety, and then I create a story called stepping on toes. I create a story called somebody's going to be upset. And that's how that emotion persists, causes the negative experience, and then causes inaction. Well, I won't call them because I want to step on toes. Well, like anything else, you call it out. In this moment, I know that this deal closing will require talking to this other person. However, I am filled with an anxiety and a dread of making that phone call. Fear is telling me that that's because if I make that phone call, the person's going to see that I'm stepping on their toes and they're going to reject me and blah, 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 on and on. I know that's a lie. I know that my anxiety has nothing to do with me making that call or what's going to happen or what might happen, etc. Right? That's the clearing fear for yourself. You could then go to your contact and have the same conversation. Hey, I need to call 2 levels up. I'm concerned you might think I'm stepping on your toes, and I want you to know that I have anxiety about that. Going to do it anyway. Short, glib answer, but hopefully that makes some sense. This is a good one. As a new life insurance agent, I'm provided leads to call on. I've developed a fear of objections. Interesting. Not interested, I'm busy, never filled this out, or I didn't do the card. How do I fortify myself? See what fear does? Fear tells you you've got to solve for this. It is unnatural to call strangers. It is unnatural to bug people that don't ask to be bugged. As such, your emotions, whatever you're feeling about that, are pretty normal, right? However, you can still use the same construct to take away the power of that story, right? Because it's not actually the emotion itself that causes the problem. It's the negative experience and it's the inaction, right? Fortifying yourself, what you're really trying to say is, how do I overcome so I can make the calls? Well, I don't need to overcome anything. I just need to see that fear is causing inaction by creating a linkage between the emotion I'm feeling, right? What is going to make some calls. And then there's this story saying, well, when I call people, they're going to be pissed. They're going to say they're busy, right? I need to fortify. It's all that story that holds you in action. This one, I think I saved this for last because it was pretty interesting. Didn't expect a question like this, right? Because this really leads to, this really stems from or is related to a physical situation. So a gentleman wrote and he said, had an aneurysm, led to a stroke, and I'm in pain. And I wrote him back and I said, well, okay, appreciate you sharing your situation. I didn't hear a question in there or something that was going wrong. And he replied, so this is a combination of 2 emails. He said, well, I walk with a cane and have an arm that doesn't function. My fear is being taken seriously with product knowledge and keeping them fully engaged beyond a sympathetic or dismissal attitude. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this. And I want to be clear, I'm not ridiculing John in any way. What I am doing is pointing out that fear doesn't want John to really look at what the situation is, right? Because there's not a fear of being taken seriously with product knowledge or engaged, right? That's an abstraction, right? I am afraid of, I am anxious of. What I read in here is, I don't want to be either dismissed for my physical impairment, nor do I want somebody to simply work with me out of sympathy, right? So when you take away all this stuff, look what's going on here, right? Fear has got so much power that it says it's not enough for you to go and do your job, do what you're paid to do. It's not enough that you're going to feel a certain way about it, but I'm going to tie your feelings, your emotions, your action and action to the potential attitude of somebody else between the most narrow of spaces, right? I need to do what I want to do. I need to feel perfect about it. And I need everybody else to feel exactly the way that I need them to feel for me to take action, right? That's not the truth. You know that, John, right? At the end of the day, let's say somebody is being sympathetic. Is that your business? Who cares? Well, I don't want them. It's not in your control. Their life is their life. Your experience is yours. Hopefully you're in a profession that brings you some validation. I understand there are physical challenges, and that sucks, right? There's lots of things like that in the world, but yours is yours, and that's what sucks about it. How others perceive you in truth, in reality, has nothing to do with your experience, but in the fear story it does. So your path is very, very simple. In this moment, I feel paralyzed from making a call. I feel terrified, whatever the emotion sensation is. Fear is telling me that I'm feeling this way because somebody's going to be sympathetic, somebody's going to dismiss me, somebody won't think I'm smart enough, etc. But that's a lie. How I feel has nothing to do with anything that occurs outside my body, and certainly doesn't have anything to do with something that hasn't happened yet, right? Driver cut me off. At least I can make the assertion that happened. So much of what we've covered today, so many of these examples, fear comes at you with stuff that hasn't happened yet, right? It's imagined. The emotion's imagined, and the stories, it could happen. What if it does? Try it. Try the exercise. Try disconnecting the story of what is and the emotion, and watch the emotions fade and lose power. It will change your life. Somebody asked, is this a self-esteem fear because of the disability? Well, self-esteem is not actually a real thing. Self-esteem is an explanation for why fear doesn't have an effect. Well, they must have self-esteem, but there's no self-esteem meter. And then when people go too far in this non-existent meter, we say they're egotistical, but that's a different point. The reality is he has a physical disability, right? That is what is. It may or may not be perceived a certain way. Fear is connecting those two. That's the problem. Okay. Want to leave you with a couple cool resources. These will be in the presentation. I'll probably put some links to them in the follow-up email. This has been a lot of fun. Really want to thank you guys who've been able to stick around. These are some great books. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, one of my favorite books in the last year. Really talks about how we as humans have evolved, how our brain works, a very scientific book, very powerful book. Into the Magic Shop, recently read James R. Doty. This is an incredible book because it's written by the head of neurosurgery at, I think, Stanford, but it's a book about how the mind has the power to change our reality. So it's this incredible mixture of somebody who is very well grounded in the reality, quote unquote, of life, but also talks a lot of this, we'll call it higher order stuff. Art of Possibility, written a while ago, 20 years ago, just a wonderful book by the Zanders about living a life full of possibility. Learning to Die in the Anthropocene is a really teeny book and just incredible. Roy Scranton writes about what he believes is the impending end of civilization due to, essentially the earth freezing over. That's really context for contemplations on death. As he says, all of our fears, or fear always traces back to the ultimate fear, the fear of death. What happens when that is inevitable? Paulo Coelho, an incredibly prolific Brazilian writer, wrote The Alchemist, and just an incredible, the book is a journey, and it's a book about a journey. And then one of my personal favorites, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, just an incredibly powerful. I probably read that book twice a year, if not 3 times a year. So thought I'd leave you some resources. Look forward to seeing you on the next one of these. Maybe we'll go to the second, third, and fourth lies of fear. If there's anything I can ever do to help, please reach out. And thanks so much for spending some time today, and give this a shot.